they feel like they get stuck because people have not yet cultivated a strong perspective and understanding that every single negative thing that happens in our life can be a gift if you choose to perceive so. Welcome to Satori Mindset Podcast. My name is Yuki Yoshii, and this is your time, your moment to reflect on yourself, your life, and to integrate your journey to feel aligned, and to ultimately make the awakened version of you a default mode. So let's begin. There's so many people in the world who are waking up into this idea that we are a spiritual being, which is fantastic. And I think the next level, the step that we want to all collectively want to enter into is to being actually living it. So there's one thing to know that we're a spiritual being, but having a subconscious assumption that we are actually physical being and living from that material point of view. So many people sort of struggle and suffer from the day-to-day life experience and seeking spiritual experience. But what we really want to understand is that there's a distinction between really understanding and embodying that we're a spiritual being and we're here on this physical plane to have a physical experience versus assuming or misunderstanding that we are a physical being and wanting to have a spiritual experience. So I often talk about we are a spiritual being living in the physical body and we're gifted with that intellect, psycho-emotional plane. So what that means is that we're not the body, then we're not even the mind, we're not the emotion, we're not the psychology. So what I want to do is to present the 6 reasons that I see in many spiritual seekers, people who are waking up and are curious about and want to integrate this information that's preventing them from realizing spiritually, to integrate, to embody, and actually to live that on a day-to-day basis. And then when we really practice understanding these 6 reasons and you practice enough and make a commitment and make a priority to live from the essence of who you are, you will soon begin living from the other side. On the other side is the embodiment of the essence of who you are, and everything becomes purposeful, meaningful, and you will come from a different point of view, creating your moment-to-moment experience. So let's dive in. The first reason is the most important reason, and that is the misidentification of who you are, what I call I versus the mind. So you're not the body, you're not the mind. And when you misidentify who you are as the mind, you get stuck in your habitual thinking, you get stuck into your familiar emotional home, and you will be living in the bubble of the belief that you're operating from. Yeah. So if you are somebody who meditates, right? Meditation is about being present in the moment and to observe your inner world. And because the mind has a tendency or nature actually wandering around as an activity, right? I often hear that the mind wants to think just like the lungs wants to breathe. So it's a natural thing for the mind to sort of create some movement, right? It's like a breath for the body, for the lungs. And when we engage in the meditation practice, you start observing your thoughts. Some of them might be louder, some of them might be whispering. Yeah. Now, you cannot be the thoughts and the observer at the same time. So you might be familiar with your thinking because you entertain and you're creating that and demonstrating that on a day-to-day basis. Most of the thinking that we do are familiar to us because we're living in that experience almost all the time, right? But because that's so loud and clear, we tend to assume that that is us. And the dimension of the observant is much, 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 much more subtle, right? So can we tap into that subtlety? And when you begin living from the observant place, from the subtle place, what I call the place of silence, the stillness inside of us, you will begin having that silent place, that settled place, the main thing to be able to shift and really being understanding that most people in the world are misidentifying them as their mind, as their emotion, as their belief. Let me give you a little bit of test, right? Our practice actually. So let's say if you have a certain emotion, right? The moment you experience that emotion, do you have a instinct, understanding, and realization that that emotion is not actually you? It's your emotion, and then your emotion cannot be you at the same time because it's yours, right? So you have an experienced emotion, you have an experienced body, you have an experienced the mind, and they are not you. So number one, misidentification of who you are, I versus the mind. Okay, number two, misinterpretation of the 3D obstacles. I call this gift versus problem. So what I see often in those who are into spirituality and also conscious manifestation, the personal creation of, tapping into the desire and creating the surrounding to match your frequency, energetic resonance. People are so good doing their practice when things are going well. But when something happens in the 3D world that you perceive as a negative, people contract, go to this place of fear, and they feel like they get stuck. Now, they feel like they get stuck because people have not yet cultivated a strong perspective and understanding that every single negative thing that happens in our life can be a gift if you choose to perceive so. That is the spiritual lens that you can use to see from a different angle. Yeah. At the moment that it happens, you might feel like, okay, this is a little resistance, right? I feel like I was flowing, but I am not able to move like I wanted to move, right? But then in that moment, you want to be able to choose to shift your perspective to see things from a different lens. Because the physical world that we're living is in the realm of the relative. So only good does not exist. Only bad does not exist. There's going to be both sides always, right? Left and right, up and down, darkness and light, having and not having, right? Gain and loss. Those cannot exist. So when we have a contrast is something that we do not want. We want to be able to see from the lens of turning that into a gift because you now have the experience of experiencing that. And then you are now able to turn that into your strength. So you can create your internal experience that is expansive as much as you can create. So number two is misinterpretation of the 3D obstacle, gift versus problem. Number three, misinterpretation of the past, present, familiar self, which is often pain, right? I call this wisdom versus trauma. Now, many people who are spiritually oriented, conscious manifestation oriented, are diving into this work because they have a certain level of awareness, right? Now, when people have a certain level of awareness, they arrive there often because of some sort of pain, psychological pain, or something that made them stuck. Now, that is a wake-up call to actually remember who we are from the perspective of the journey of the soul. But then I think what I still see often is for people who are stuck in the past trauma, the emotional sort of stagnant, and the feeling that's inside of them that they haven't yet able to let go fully. This is again, what we want to do is to use the spiritual lens and understand the nature of this relative world and to really understand the journey of the soul that we are here to, we're designed to forget who we are. I call this divine blueprint, right? We're designed to forget who we are in order to remember who we are, right? So the pain and the trauma that happens in the past, and often we tend to hold on to, by the way, because when we were little, we didn't have that conscious awareness to reject. So it kind of enter into our system and we're holding on to those emotional dynamic that is really not represent who we are. right? It could be a sense of worthiness. It could be some shame. It could be something that people told you that you felt offended, right? Whatever that is, right? But that's there to be able to remember who we are, right? Many people are seeking joy, happiness, right? Freedom and love. But you are not in this relative realm. You are not able to really experience what love is until you experience what love is not. You are going to be able to appreciate and enjoy joy by experiencing what joy is not. You will be able to experience the fullness of life by experiencing both. You cannot understand and experience what happiness is if happiness is all there is. That's the beauty of this relative realm. So we want to be able to practice embracing it, right? So the past, present, familiar self, the pain, many people, what they look at as a trauma, want to be able to work inside of us to be able to see those feelings and the past memory from a spiritual point of view to turn that into your wisdom. And why that can be turned into the wisdom? Because if you didn't experience that, you do not have the understanding of life, what life is that you have at this moment. And because you experience that, you can empathize and understand others. That is a wisdom. Yeah. Number 3 is misinterpretation of the past, present, familiar self. And that is wisdom versus trauma. Let's go number 4. The lack of mastery of imagination. This is creating versus creative. Now, many people have this habitual tendency of creating imagination from the outside in. Something happens, and then you start creating your thought process, your worry process of projecting towards future that doesn't really exist, imagining the worst case scenario. Yeah. For many people, that sounds familiar to them. Yeah. But we're here to create, not to be created. It's sort of like a dance, right? Because we have this sort of biological nature that we want to stay safe. So something threat happens in the outside, we sort of project towards future to inform us to stay safe. So it's important to understand that we have that biological tendency and to understand that we are a spiritual being, meaning that we are the creator of our own life. So to learn how to protect our imagination and thoughts that might get hijacked from the outside contrast, even the past, present memory contrast, yeah, and to train our mind to shift our attention to choose to imagine things that's based on our desire and based on our vision, right? What is it that we want and what we want to be experiencing? What is it that allows you to feel expansive and absolutely free? And we want to put ourselves into that imagination and to train our attention to live there more than what you perceive from the outside, in the outside world. Yeah, that requires a little bit of training. It's an attention training to stay in the imagination of the fulfillment of the desire. So number 4 is the lack of mastery of imagination, creating versus creative. Number 5, lack of mastery of feeling, letting go and flow versus resisting and holding on to. So not many people are aware that they have a suppressed feeling that they sort of cultivated in their childhood. Yeah. That suppressed feeling manifests to the pattern thought. The suppressed feeling shapes the belief that we're operating from. Yeah. So feeling is interesting. Feeling is something that, you can look at the outside and feel something from the outside, right? And you can imagine and create feeling, right? You can tap into the spiritual dimension and then truly sense and feel something, right? I found that feeling is the medium that sort of crosses all dimension. I call it 3-dimensional physical plane, 4-dimensional psycho-emotional plane, 5th-dimensional spiritual plane. Feeling permeates all 3 planes. That's why it's important. And many people are holding on to some suppressed feelings at the subconscious level, and that becomes the fuel to perceive, fuel to think thought. So until we learn how to release and let go and flow the energy, because when you have a resisting and holding on to suppressed feeling, you are feeling stuck and your outside is being manifested based on the suppressed feeling. So we want to be able to learn how to let go and let it flow, so energy continue to circulate to rebirth into the new version of it. So number 5 is lack of mastery of feeling, letting go and flow versus resisting and holding on to. The last reason number 6, is lack of mastery of becoming, embodying versus understanding. So I'm speaking to you, you're listening to this material, information, visual and auditory, or maybe just auditory, right? Now, you now have a certain understanding of what I'm presenting. Now, that doesn't mean that you're gonna start living what I'm talking about right away. So there's a gap between what you intellectually understand, receiving information, and actually embodying it, right? How do we embody? When the subconscious accept the new idea, you are actually begin living it. So learning about the information is an intellectual exercise. Reading books after book and putting on the shelf is a self-help practice, but we want to be able to do self-help practice to absorb that into the self, not the shelf. So the difference between learning about it and learning it is the difference between understanding as an information intellectually and living and owning that idea and begin living it. Now, when you begin understanding at the deeper level and begin practicing these 6 reasons, all the spiritual seekers that begin shifting, integrating all that information to begin creating spiritual realization and begin living from the essence of who we are. Now, when we have that understanding and capacity to perceive the world yourself from that place, the life becomes meaningful, intentional, purpose, and whole. And there's nothing else that you can create that experience inside of you. And the understanding and the practice, and you need a little bit of commitment and dedication. This for me is the most important thing to practice on a day-to-day basis. So everything else that we do is that, the content of life becomes vibrant and meaningful. And now we're here to live exactly the way that we're supposed to and designed to live. We are the creator of our own life, and we can demonstrate that by practicing these 6 reasons to be able to live a life embodying spiritual essence. So enjoy the practice and comment below if you have any questions. Thank you for listening to the podcast. A message I want you to take with you is this: you have a power to choose how you see yourself and the world at any given moment. So stay connected to that wisdom.